folks, to another episode of That Anita Live, emotional healing to help you create a happier life. Is there a doctor in the house? This episode may turn into mayhem because my girl is in the building. Fellow healer and mental health guru Dr. Cindy is here to share her expertise around emotional and mental health. Dr. Cindy T. Graham holds a bachelor in psychology from Princeton University, go Tigers, and a master's and a doctoral degree from Louisiana State University. She is a licensed, board-certified, and approved clinical psychologist operating from her private practice, providing services to children and adolescents in their assessment and treatment of various disorders, including autism, behavioral problems, ADHD, anxiety disorders, and depressed and mood disorders. Help me welcome Dr. Cindy T. Graham to That Anita Live. What's up, girl?
Hi, what's up? How are you?
Good, how are you?
It's good to be here, thank you.
So what made you go into clinical psychology?
So I think I'm kind of a strange bird in that way because aside from wanting to be a fashion designer when I was little, the next best thing after that for me, once that reality was shattered, because I'm short, was clinical psychology. So literally since middle school, I've wanted to be a clinical psychologist. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you know there is such a huge stigma around mental health.
Right.
So even though there was that stigma, you still chose it as the field to dedicate your life to.
Absolutely. And so my family is originally from Haiti. Both my parents emigrated to the United States. It's a huge, huge stigma in Haitian culture.
Wow.
Don't go to therapy. You pretty much don't even talk about mental illness. It's just not, it's not a thing. So yeah, so I was kind of a little bit on the outskirts of everything. Usually you should become a medical doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer if you're a Haitian.
The three favorites of every parent.
Right, exactly.
You're going to be.
Right. So I'm still a doctor. I'm just a feelings doctor.
Right.
I am, so.
Why do you feel that stigma is? Not only in Haiti, but in United States, and then not just across the United States, but across cultures.
Right, yeah, definitely. So it's almost this view of weakness, of vulnerability in a bad way. Like we're supposed to be strong at all times. And it's not even that having mental illness means that you're not strong. You are, to be able to struggle with anxiety and depression and you know, if you struggle with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, autism, it's terribly difficult to make it through a world that really doesn't respect you as an individual because of this disorder that you're diagnosed with. So yeah, unfortunately, societies see it as being a sign of weakness when really it's not at all.
Does that stop some people from, I guess, admitting it even though they are in therapy?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are, weekly, I talk with people about, well, like, how am I going to tell my family and I'm like, you don't have to just, you know, you don't open the conversation with, by the way, I struggle with generalized anxiety disorder. It should come up just like anything else would come up in your life naturally as you get to know the person. With somebody that you're comfortable with, sure, bring it up. And unfortunately, because there's often such stigma in families, it just starts there. You know, they learn that they should be hiding it and keeping it a secret. So, you know, if you have a hard time telling something to your family, how are you even going to tell, you know, a close friend or your boss if you needed the time off for, you know, a particular reason? So yeah, it's really unfortunate.
What's the biggest, I guess, backlash that you've heard that somebody has received once they have admitted to family and friends, just their inner circle, that they have a mental illness?
Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's the worst that I've seen, I would say, in the grand scheme of things, probably hasn't been as bad just in terms of what I've had my clients report back to me. But usually that kind of putting it down, the ostracizing, you just need to pray more.
Girl.
And I'm a person of faith, so let's definitely put that out there. So I'm not putting down religion whatsoever. But it's the idea that if you have if your relationship with God is what it should be, then you wouldn't struggle with this. But would we ever tell somebody who has cancer, like, if you prayed better, you wouldn't have cancer?
Prayer changes things, but there's also our responsibility in that.
Absolutely.
So it isn't that you just, trust me, I have sat many days and wished that when I wake up in the morning, there's $1 million on my kitchen table.
Right.
It doesn't happen like that.
It's gonna happen. Right.
So,
right.
So I have to get up and figure out
how to bring that $1 million to the table.
Right.
But first, you should start with breakfast.
So there is our responsibility in that whole prayer realm.
Right, absolutely.
And how God helps.
Absolutely.
What are some of your I guess, backlashes from, because you specialize in children and adolescents. So do you find children harder to reach or adults?
Adults are far, and I take a very much behavioral perspective. So a lot of learning, modeling, it goes alongside with my beliefs about how people come to be. So kind of like that phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Okay.
Obviously, I believe you can, because it's just a lot harder. So the kids are a lot more open and inviting. Some struggle with that more so because they're just more shy or afraid to open up to someone in general.
More introverted.
But in terms of believing that the process can work, adults are a lot harder in general. So.
Parents. A parent sometimes difficult when it comes to a child. If the school, let's say the school diagnosed a child and they refer to you.
Right.
And the parent says, I don't know what the school is talking about. My child
right.
does not have these issues.
That's not, no. Especially grandparents. That's a...
he just need a whooping.
right. Yeah.
he just needs behind. He just need a whooping.
It's like, but
nothing wrong with that child.
Yeah. So parents, what I will say is, if the parents don't come in with somewhat of an open mind, parents who tend to fit that profile don't stay very long. With me, because again, I put a lot of responsibility also on the parents and not just on the child. So if a parent kind of comes to me and expects me to fix their child, with not much effort from them,
this is his problem. It's not my problem.
You're not a good fit for me, because a lot of what I do is parent training as well, and teaching parents how to respond better to their kids.
For instance, if you had a parent and the child was suffering with anxiety, any new experience, even visiting the home of maybe a family friend, the family friend he knows, the home he does not, and goes into a crying fit in the car and won't get out.
Right.
What is your suggestion?
Right. So first of all, it's empathy, validating the feelings of the child. But at the same time, it's a very careful balance between not providing too much negative attention to those behavior problems. Certainly don't yell. It'll get out of the car! You're gonna go in there, you'll have... It's more focusing on, look, honey, I understand that this is scary for you. Remember how much you loved Uncle Bob. Remember some of the things you liked doing with Uncle Bob. You know how you love dogs. He's got a nice little dog that you're going to find so cute.
Okay.
So we try to find things that the child can kind of hold on to as a safety net. Have the parents let the child know exactly where they're, not exactly where they're going to be, but know that they're going to be within calling distance at any particular point in time. Preferably, I like for parents to prep the child a little bit ahead of time. Whenever parents say, like, I don't tell them where we're going. I just kind of spring it on them. I'm like, no, we have to stop doing that.
Yes.
Preparation is a good thing. So, especially, I feel bad for dentists after doing what I do, because that's the number one place in the pediatrician where I'll have, or actually in coming to see me, I'll ask them, so do you know what I do? And I talk with the parents about introducing me and telling them what I do, and kids will say, no. Are you a teacher? And I'm like, not really. I will be teaching you some things. So yeah, those are always the situations that we want to try to avoid, because we don't want the child to come into my office. We want them to have a positive experience going in. So if they feel blindsided, especially with teenagers, it takes it to a whole other level. I've had teens that have sat there the whole time. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be a good 3-4 sessions so I'm able to break down that wall.
Right, as you try and break that wall down to get them to trust you.
Exactly, because so that is why it's so important for parents.
Have they ever trusted you coming in the door?
Yes,
okay.
Certainly. And sometimes almost inappropriately so, because sometimes, again, more so with teenagers, that there's almost this me and the teenager against the parent type of mentality that they then take on. I actually do have a client right now that, that is often eager to get the parent to leave the room so they can tell me, their side of the story. But as much as I am their advocate, I also very clearly say to the teens that I see, look, I'm also here to help your parents be effective parents for you too. So, it's not us against them, it's all of us working together.
What's the longest time it's ever taken?
Oh, to get the whole family.
To get trust.
Oh,
yeah. Once they're in your office and the sessions have begun, how many sessions has it taken the longest case for someone to actually trust you, let the wall down, and begin to tell you?
Honestly, so actually very recently in this past year, I had, let me think, it was at least 6 sessions with a teenager, middle school age, and we had a parent meeting to discuss it, and it was just a very, prior to coming in, I wouldn't have known that there was that level of issue happening before getting to my office. The team very polite. I couldn't complain behaviorally, but yeah, the parents said that at home it was a completely different story. So that was 6 sessions of trying to.
Because I recently had a conversation with a young man who has been seeing the same therapist for 10 years and told me in that one conversation more than he's told his therapist in 10 years. And I'm like, but this is the crust of what the therapist needs to be able to help you get through your issues. So you're wasting not just your time and your money, but your energy and not giving the professional what they need. It's not a magic wand that when you step into the office, you don't have to divulge anything. That has to be a safe and a trust space for them to actually give you absolutely. And I'm very straightforward with parents as well. So usually I like to meet with parents about once a month, once every 6 weeks, usually at the longest. And I let them know if I feel like their child is not coming around to opening up to me. And then of course, on the other side, there are parents like, did they tell you about? And I'm like, yeah, they told me. we're good. But I'm very straightforward because I don't want to have, I don't want to torture the child. I don't want them to feel like they're forced to come here. It should be a positive experience. So, I definitely talk to parents about that, and sometimes they go back and try to coerce, and when it's not a good fit, it's just not a good fit. Because sometimes the parents want it to happen a lot faster than it actually does.
Right. And especially with teenagers, young kids, so much easier. You're kind of like playtime. They build that trust really easily in general. But when it comes to teenagers, they're kind of at that phase anyway where they're trying to figure out their independence and trying to separate themselves from their parents in terms of their identity. So, that's definitely going to be a time where they're going to push back against what their parents want them to do. So then in walks.
And you're part of that.
Right, exactly.
With that, we'll be right back after this message.
Welcome to That Anita Live TV on YouTube. Here at That Anita Live, I share episodes about emotional healing to help you create a happier life. How do I do that? Through awareness, education, and most importantly, you, the community. By sharing tips and techniques from real people with real stories of overcoming trauma and abuse to live relentless lives. Hanging out with me, you'll laugh, you'll learn, but most importantly, you'll heal. Never miss a moment. Subscribe to That Anita Live's YouTube channel today. Subscribe via thatanitalive.com/YouTube.
Welcome, folks, to That Anita Live. I sit here today with two women that are very opinionated. Our topic is free-range parenting, and I sit with Dr. Cindy T. Graham and Danielle Mative. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Free-range parenting. Danielle, we're very familiar with the situation that you went through, 2014, 2015, being investigated by CPS, having the police in your household, your two kids that were traumatized and terrified. Dr. Cindy, not only do you counsel and provide therapy for children and adolescents, but you also have two sons yourself. And they are 5 and 3?
5 and almost 3. Yeah, he's still 2. We'll hold on to that.
Mom wants to keep her baby.
That's right. They're still the babies. Mine are 12 and 9.
So, Dr. Cindy, I'll start with you. In what situation should a parent really be stark fearful of allowing their children to play outside?
Right. So I think that if there is quite an established history pattern of dangerous behavior for the child given their level of age. Obviously, as kids get older, into the teenage years, they become more familiar with dangers that are around them. You know, you would expect a teenager to, pretty much be able to navigate certain situations, stranger danger, confidently on their own. But then when you're talking about much younger kids, you're in a different situation. So yeah, if you're well aware of what the dangers are in your society, crime rates in your community, those are things that I think you should take into consideration.
So Danielle, what was it about your kids that you felt they were mature enough to walk 2 blocks home from the park?
Right, I didn't think necessarily. Well, the funny thing is people, a lot of times in these, I've talked to folks and they're like, well, look at this interesting new parenting style. And what we have to remember is the way that we're raising kids today, that's what's new, right? We all grew up going to the park. We all grew up biking around. My kids just spent 4 weeks up in Canada. We were there with them for 2 weeks, and people still let their kids go places in Montreal, big city. When we were in Paris, we saw the same thing in Italy. I've spoken to people from all over Africa and Asia. All over the world, this is still what people do. And it's in the United States that we've gotten really, really fearful. And then a couple of other Anglo societies like Australia and it seems like England. So we also have to put it in that perspective. That said, of course I understand that things do feel really different these days. People are much more fearful. And I think part of that is that we're not as familiar with our neighborhoods. So I would say that if parents want to let their kids have more freedom, as we did, you get to know your neighborhood yourself. I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is we let our kids, they actually, they went to 2 parks, the 2 times they were picked up. The distance was 1 mile. That's also how far their school is, and they've walked it many times. So we've walked that neighborhood. We love to walk. We love to, we walk to synagogue, we walk to the store. So my kids knew their neighborhood, and I knew what they were capable of. So that's why I felt comfortable, because I'd seen them cross the street. I'd say, okay, you tell us when we're going to cross the street, and okay, they hold each other's hands, and go to the store and you can pay at the counter. Just the little things that teach kids, on their way to be adults, just those skills. I think we've kind of, because like I said, we're not as involved in our communities, we're often so rushed that we've kind of let that skill training slip. We're like, oh, it's easier for me to do the laundry for them. It's easier for me to make dinner. It's easier for me, right? But these are the skills that kids need that build their confidence so they can then go to the park.
Because it handicaps them versus preparing them to be independent.
Exactly.
At what age do you feel that most kids should be trusted to see whether or not that first time they can actually handle, whether it's being home alone or walking home from the bus or walking to the bus in the morning?
Right. So I think that that's extremely subjective because there are, and we were kind of talking a little bit before, that it depends on the maturity of the child. So what I recommend that parents do, and what I do with my own children, is that we take little tidbits along the way. So when before we cross the street, we're on the sidewalk, not even to the grassy area, I say, okay, what do we need to do? And I do this with my 5 and my 2-year-old are right next to me, and my 5-year-old chimes in, you look both ways. Which way do you look first? And we kind of go through the whole process so that by the time they get to the point where, you know, down the road, if they ask to go to the park, you know, by themselves or what have you, go to a neighbor's house around the corner, that they know the different things that they need to look out for. So I think it's definitely something that parents should be doing all along the way in increments. And then it's going to depend on the maturity of your child. Some kids do. I know I matured really fast. You know, I was definitely one of those very responsible.
But you're the oldest.
Oldest female, second of four. So so it was, and my parents did train that into us as well about how to be, and we came from a very strict upbringing, so it wasn't like they were, you know, they weren't very laid back in their parenting style. They were very hands-on, but they did teach us along the way what we needed, you know, to know when it came to being out in the community.
Right.
You heard a lot about Danielle's ordeal and going through it with CPS and so forth. Do you feel that CPS sometimes is just following the protocol versus being genuinely concerned about what's going on in the home?
Right. I think it's, I feel for CPS based on, you know, the area that I live in the Baltimore metro area. They're certainly overwhelmed, and even in other counties, in Anne Arundel, where my practice is, they are overwhelmed. So I can understand where the intent may be genuine, but for lack of time, lack of resources, lack of manpower, it can be difficult to sort through, you know, the details. So you just kind of go down the checklist, unfortunately. It was, so I think it does become difficult in that way. So I don't fault them for their process. I think it's the process, that checklist, that needs to be revised to make sure that it has more oversight, takes more things into account before you go to the extreme of arresting parents.
Now, I know that you're running for Montgomery County Council. Being a council member, what would you change in that process?
Well, I think the process has already been changed, which I think was very helpful.
In Maryland?
In Maryland, so in Montgomery County.
Right, but there are other states that are trailing behind. And they could use Maryland as a model to review and change their own processes.
That's a great question. I think one thing is, like, as she was just saying, that there's this, you know, kind of people are completely overwhelmed and understaffed, and I mean, just underappreciated. We really need to pay people better, staff it better, make sure there's training, better training.
They're part of the infrastructure that is falling apart.
Absolutely. I think our mental health, our social services, so make sure that these agencies have the resources they need. I think also, I mean, I don't, you know, it's hard to get into the details, but there's some of the way the federal versus state laws are set up kind of incentivize a little more, even if people mean well, there's more of an incentive to remove the kids from the family if it seems like, you know, so we have too many kids going into foster care. So really, on paper, we say, oh, we want to, you know, keeping the family together is the highest priority. We really need to talk about what that looks like. If you have a family where there was some neglect, what was the cause? Because poverty is not a reason to label somebody as a bad parent. And that's a lot of what we're seeing. Parents can't provide for their children. Oh, then we'll just take them away. Well, no. We need to put resources into the family. So I think, I mean, a lot of it comes down to having more resources and really shifting the focus where it really is on recognizing that the best place for that child, barring serious harm, or parents that, I mean, then there are bad parents, we know that, but they're the exception. Barring that situation, the best place for the child is in that home, and what can we do to help them there?
So how long did your kids go through counseling after? Was it after the first time or after both times?
So it was after the second time that we really, the first time was like, that was a weird situation. You know, it was scary, but it was really being held in the police car and then held at CPS. I mean, they were picked up, you know, a little after 5, and they didn't see us again until 11. They didn't eat. If we didn't bring food to the crisis center, they wouldn't have had dinner. So that was really, really hard. And then afterwards, I mean, it was immediately, you know, there was a therapist we already knew that we had spoken to for other issues, just focus issues in school. So she already knew our family, and she said, I will clear my calendar to get you guys in, because I know this is really serious. I'd say we went like 5 or 6 sessions And it was with this idea that we could always check back in with her. So I don't think it was like all over, but that's what we use sort of to handle the most acute symptoms. And then we also used a lot of the techniques that she talked about, you know, just kind of giving the kids opportunities to talk about what had happened, and, you know, letting them know there was a space that they could bring it up. Like, we weren't going to force them to, but, you know, and even now, I mean, I talked to my son about it 3 weeks ago, and there's still some, you know, really strong emotions there. I mean, it was definitely a life-shaping experience.
You're very familiar with Danielle's story. Is there anything in her story, for instance, the kids walking home from the park, or their age, or the way CPS handled it, that you have a strong opinion of?
Yeah, so actually I remember a lot about the story coming out. I can't remember whether it was Facebook or Twitter, but it was one of the social media outlets. And shortly after I read the story for myself, my sister, who's a lawyer, I'm an attorney in Pittsburgh, she tweeted me the story, and she was like, "What is this? Like, what's going on in Maryland?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So for me, I was really horrified, honestly. And my practice, we're all female. We're all, well, not anymore. We were all female at the time. Most of us moms, we were just shocked. We were absolutely shocked that this had happened, because, and our thought was, what is going on in our communities that we can't allow kids to walk to the park. I remember when I was younger, oh gosh, how old was my sister and I were 2 years apart. Maybe I was in high school and she was in middle school. We would walk miles away from the house down to the mall and back, and it was fine. It was not an issue at all. You know, and so it was just appalling to us that this had happened. And then once we heard it happened again, we were like, this can't be reality. and to hear what your kids went through, it really did. It really, we had conversations, multiple conversations about, well, does this mean we shouldn't do this for our children? It really causes you to change how you're parenting, how you're living your life in a way that seems unfair.
In your inner circle, did you see any changes as to how people were raising or treating their children?
You know, I'll say no. Again, partially based on the metro area that I live in. I think in terms of my friends that are in more of a suburban atmosphere, so our kids are pretty young as well. So we are talking, and especially a couple of years ago, in that like 5-year-old range. So it is a kind of another shift down.
Yes.
So, you know, there is that question there. So in a lot of ways it didn't impact us, but it was a conversation that we had multiple times. We had families coming in talking about it as well. So, you know, people were concerned, they were worried. So,
what was your advice to them when they were coming in saying, okay, do I have to change the way I parent my child? Can my child not walk to the store and back anymore?
And it was, so that was a tough issue, because so for us, what we surmised was that we felt like maybe there was some type of targeting that was happening there for whatever reason. Because it didn't make sense to us why one family would have been targeted not just once but then twice, given their neighborhood. So, you know, our advice was try to get to know the neighbors, try to make sure that you have that sense of community. Immediately around it, it was more so kind of, lay low for a little while until this blows over, in case it is something that starts to, you know, copycat behavior, in case people do start to, you know, it starts to expand. And I think thankfully it didn't, but it was, and we had to be realistic about it and kind of say, or at least I should say, I had to be realistic and say, you know, we don't know the circumstances of the story, so err on the side of caution for now. So.
There is never a time when you shouldn't seek help for an issue. Whether it is you or a loved one, there is hope and there is help. There are hotlines, there are support groups. Reach out, because sometimes you don't want to be fixed, you just want to be heard. To learn more about Dr. Cindy, visit cindytgrahamphd.com. Or you can find her on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Cindy T. Graham, PhD. Make the commitment to start your journey to emotional healing today. I'm Anita, your host. Be sure to check out thatanitalive.com for where and when to view our next episode.